Welcome to Season 3 on the Praxologie podcast, where theology fuels the mission of the church, with your hosts, John Smith and Tyler Patty, sitting across from me. For those of you watching on YouTube, well done. For those of you just listening, I hope you like our voices. We have some exciting things going on this season on the topic, Serving Missionally, Your Knowledge Toolkit for Success. This season will explore how to grow in serving as a missional disciple, beginning with leadership and how that relates to serving on mission with God. The rest of the season is shaped around exploring both topics and people that are important knowledge-based tools for a well-rounded toolkit for serving on mission. In this opening episode, we discuss what leadership is, how it's used in theology, which is kind of haphazard sometimes, spoiler alerts, and much more. So let's dive in. But first, Tyler.
Yes.
Just recently, I asked you a question. I said, how many hits does Google produce if I type the word leadership? And do you remember what you told me?
Yeah, I was quite taken aback. I'm not a numbers guy. Surprise, surprise. So I said, well, maybe 120 million. That sounded like a really high number in my head.
And then my next question I narrowed down. I said, what about biblical leadership? If we type in the word biblical in front of leadership on Google, how many hits does it produce?
I said, I thought again. I triangulated the dimension of the solar system and
divided by pi
and came out with a number of 80,000.
A very neat number to do all that.
I know.
It's like 80,000 and 0.001 or something you would expect. But hey, we should give you credit for one thing.
Yes.
The discrepancy, you nailed it.
Yes.
So 120 million versus 80,000. There's a huge difference there of maybe Google's not Christian or something, or there's just not as much written as you would think there is that's picked up on Google, which is probably about everything, I would think,
probably
related to biblical leadership. So we have to give you credit for catching the broader trend. So here's the actual results. And I don't math either, so hopefully I can say that these massive numbers correctly. Google, just searching for leadership, is 10,700,000,000 results in 0.35 seconds.
I can't count that fast.
I can't believe there's computers that can do that. But if we do the same thing, biblical leadership, 203 million, it's so much slower too, 0.39 seconds. So 0.04 seconds slower to bring up like 9+ billion less results.
I mean, thinking theologically is hard work. You need those extra 4 milliseconds to really reflect and think deeply. So, not surprised.
So the question becomes, and I was curious because I was asking this question, assuming that something like what we found was going to be true, what is it saying? And I think it might confirm a hunch, or at least I suppose we have a bias in coming to this topic, that leadership is often engaged, but not critically within theology. It's just brought in to prove a point, and then we kind of like quickly do away with it. You know what I mean? Do you have an example? I can't think of it. Maybe think of an example.
Oh, I can't. I'm not good at thinking on my feet.
Well, you're sitting down. You're not on your feet.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, oh man. I mean, everybody talks about how we need to, be leaders in order for the church to grow, but what that ends up being is just, an excuse for the pastor or the guy who's in charge, the functional leader, to basically just tell everybody else what to do.
I mean, yeah, that's an example. Also, leadership challenge.
Yeah,
it's a quite a lengthy study that was done, and there's a series of, what do they call them, seminars that people lead, and you can get a certificate when going through it. Highly recommend it. A lot of people within Josiah Venture, including our team, have gone through, and it's changed how we lead others and how we lead each other and ourselves, which is what we're going to focus on in this episode, quite dramatically since we've done it. But even within that, the question often is posed: is what perspective is this book coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Because they bring in biblical examples.
Well, that's a good example. It was this particular research was done sociologically, like by studying effective leaders and then discovering what made them effective, essentially. And then there is a book called Leadership Challenge from a Christian Perspective, which is basically just a bunch of Christians saying, "Yeah, we like that," and not really actually thinking about it very critically. So we asked our teammate, who's an expert on these things, is this at all like trying to engage theologically with these concepts, or is it just kind of like an endorsement? And he said it's just an endorsement.
Which is, again, this is fantastic material, and it's great material, but it does fall into this pattern of what we're talking about, probably. So let me take it.
Well, I think just side note as well is I think that Christians go to the Bible for theology, but go elsewhere for leadership. That's maybe that's the bigger issue, or the bigger problem is we don't really know how to think biblically about leadership when there are such seemingly great tools elsewhere, and those might be great tools, but they also need to be brought and connected with the biblical perspective. Otherwise, we're just uncritically taking stuff from another discipline and then, cramming it into our context. But it's like, a surfboard might be a great thing to use on the beach if you're in Croatia, but just because it's a great thing to use on the beach in Croatia doesn't mean it's a great thing to use in a landlocked country of the Czech Republic.
Or like the north coast of Belgium, where I was this summer.
Yeah.
I mean, there were people out there doing windsurfing, but I think that's about all you can do because it's just too windy. I would think to just use a surfboard like that, like it's nice in Croatia. Yeah. Point taken. One more thing. Well, I suppose methodologically, what that brings up is what are we doing in terms of theology and the rest of disciplines? My field, systematic theology, we love to do interdisciplinary work. The starting point is clearly theology, and we do bring in other stuff. And the method or the way and how you bring the other stuff in is kind of what we're talking about here. It really is make or break, and hopefully we can draw that deeper level conversation that's happening in academic methodologies and draw that out a little bit more, if not this episode, over the course of the season. But one final thing from Google.
Oh, yes. More Google.
When you do a Google search, you know how on the right-hand side it always brings up these recommended books?
Maybe that's just for you because you like books.
Google knows me too well.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's targeted ads.
No, it's definitely from Google, but it comes up on the side. And I for those watching, you also probably cannot tell on Tyler's face right now if he's joking or not. So I'm just moving forward.
Keep going.
There's a book that comes up, Biblical Leadership: Becoming a Different Type of Leader by Ken Collier and Matt Williams. And that's the only one.
Oh.
You search leadership and there's a bunch of stuff like the latest Harvard Review book, the latest book from
Stephen Covey book.
Yeah, or like David Brooks or somebody, like he writes for the New York Times. Is it the Times? He writes for an American newspaper, and he also publishes a lot on things like randomly. So it's people like him. But in the biblical genre, only this book comes up. And there are many, many more. So when we want to provide a toolkit over the course of the season, part of it is to give you some book titles. And we have several recommendations here throughout the rest of this episode. But first, Tyler, what do you think about leadership? What should we define it? Should we talk about it functionally? I think most people in theology talk about its function, what it does, and how it's helpful. If we move in the realm of functional definition, perhaps somewhere between those two, what do you think? Like initially, what are you thinking?
Yeah, lots of thoughts, but I would say the first place my mind goes is that leadership is is kind of a means to an end. It's not that it's not something to be like held onto too tightly, but that it's something to be stewarded for another greater purpose. There are lots of examples in Scripture where bad leaders, or even maybe not bad leaders, lack of leaders caused a lot of problems. And so one example of that is the period of the Judges. Some of them were great. Some of them were really, really bad. But the refrain that keeps repeating throughout the book of Judges is everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And at this time, Israel did not yet have a king. So there's obviously a leadership vacuum, somebody who can actually unite all these tribes, because that's what the problem is, that there were these tribal wars at the time. And so there's this hope that, okay, if there's a good leader, then he'll kind of restore some peace and unity and actually help us achieve what the task that was given to us of inhabiting the land, being a holy nation, and being a light to the nations. But that's contrasted also with a very pessimistic picture of the kingship, of leadership, as presented in Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel, but then also referring back to Deuteronomy 17. And Deuteronomy 17 is part of Moses' sermon to Israel before they're about to go and enter the land. And there's this really interesting warning where he says, when you cry out and ask for a king like the nations, then this is what you've got to watch out for. And it's kind of like an inevitable, like I know this is going to happen, but when it does happen, these are some things that you need to watch out for. So there's not even really a positive picture. It's more like let's keep this from falling apart. And he says, this leader can't acquire much wealth, can't acquire much power, like military power, and he can't acquire many women. Has to be careful. And then thirdly, he's not allowed to elevate himself above his brothers. But instead, he's supposed to make himself a copy of the law and meditate on it. And so there's this idea of the king is not there to serve himself, not there to build his own kingdom, but he's there to shepherd the people and facilitate the people, point the people back to God and help them to achieve what they've been called to without elevating himself too highly. So that's where I'd go biblically to start thinking about these things.
Yeah, we're gonna land there. I think the two of us talking, at least, we're probably gonna land on the realm of servant leadership.
Yeah.
But that word is like, those. Thankfully, it doesn't happen here in Europe very often, but people who put bumper stickers on their car that say phrases like servant leadership because they sound cool, but nobody knows what they mean. We need to focus more on drilling it down. And one of the ways is to talk about how it functions, like what it actually is doing. And you bring up some biblical pictures. I think there is others here from, well, I think if we think about theology, we first have to think about anthropology, so who we are as people. And if we think about that, we think, my brain is connected to my body. It goes together. So in that way, servant leadership as an idea has to involve my entire body, which means that leading myself, or servant leadership, leading myself as I'm leading others, because they both work together, then we have to do interdisciplinary work. Again, from the starting point of theology. But there we have Daniel Goleman. He's quite popular author in the realm of leadership. He focuses more on if you're focusing on the service aspect, he's focusing on the social and emotional intelligence of a person. Or Don Howell, who we'll bring in a second. It's an older text. I'm holding it up for the camera. Servants of the Servant, a biblical theology of leadership. And it's quite a good study in terms of it's dealing with character portrayals of the mostly the Old Testament, if I remember correctly, as ways of moving forward for leadership. There's other books. Shackleton's Way. This one's for the adventurous types who are are listening, by Morel and I can't pronounce the second name, Chaparral, or Stronger Than Steel by the late R.C. Sproul. That's actually a fantastic older book about a gentleman who worked in a steel mill and basically just transformed it for the sake of the gospel.
Wow.
So American context, but still really thought-provoking in terms of what Sproul draws out for general character focus of leadership. And then there's Aubrey Malphurs, who I hesitate to recommend because I don't like those texts very much. But there's stuff like Being Leaders and a lot of other texts that he's wrote that focuses on like the person of the leader themselves. Greg Ogden's Leadership Essentials, that was just recently recommended to me by the same person who Tyler was referring to about the Leadership Challenge question that we asked. And these are all great. And we recommend a lot of them, except for maybe I did not recommend Aubrey Malphurs. But others may find it helpful, and it is good to triangulate some themes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, you focused on servant leadership, on service.
Yes.
These are saying, no, it's emotional intelligence, it's this, it's this, it's this. Are we talking about individual pieces of the puzzle? Yes. Can we ever put them together? That's the question. Can we meaningfully integrate these things and put them together with the right focus? The right focus, at least on this podcast, is in theology. What are your thoughts?
Well, behind all of this is an important question of, is leadership something that's innate, or is it something that can be learned? And maybe
that's anthropology again.
Yeah, that's anthropology. Yeah, and that's right. Are we the way we are because of nature or nurture? And early studies on leadership really focused on the idea of they have the it factor. They're super charismatic. They just have something nobody else has, and that's what makes you a leader.
It's like a DNA trait.
Yeah, a DNA trait. But these days there's more recognition that good leadership can be stewarded. It can be developed, and so anybody can be a leader. Not everybody is a leader, but everybody could be a leader in some way or another, and that fits, I think, well with our even discussion today of leading yourself. Okay, you might not even be leading anybody else, but you do have some ownership over leading yourself well, and so character is a really important part of that, but important to leadership. But that it's not only focused on yourself, but it is focused on others and leading others well. So it's not just an innate thing that, leadership is all about me. It's, at least I think, biblically, it's about other people.
So let me try to press the metaphor then of servant leadership and go to, fact check me, but I think it's John 13.
I can fact check you.
1 to 20, somewhere in there.
You said John?
Yeah. Everybody will know the passage, even if I've misquoted the context, where Jesus washes the disciples' feet.
Yep.
So we have that. I mean, that's very clearly an act of service. That's ultimately proving a point forward to what Jesus does as the true act of sacrifice on the cross. In a real sense, washing the feet of the world. It kind of is the metaphor that's brought forward. The cross as a foot washing mechanism or a cleansing mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we can't just take that part of the Bible and say servant leadership, yes, there it is. And now let's look for the other examples where they did it in the early church. Here's where Paul says, yes, 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 yes. And then Revelation will just, whatever. But we can't miss some of these other aspects of the Gospels themselves of what Jesus is doing. And there are many, many times where Jesus doesn't heal everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Where Jesus intentionally tries to withdraw, tries to slow down, and rests. And one has to wonder if he's doing that, in part because he wants to commune with his Father in the Spirit, and there's always people around, so getting away. But also, like, he is human, and so that the physical aspect of rest. The question becomes, if Jesus never withdrew, then how would that have changed his ministry? Because we often think that we can't withdraw, we just have to continually move forward. And so that shifts the conversation of servant leadership into, I have to lead others, and leading myself as part of that. It's not uncritical forms of self-care, though, I think, that's happening, well, in pop psychology and other things, where, I mean, honestly, people are like, I just don't want to deal with people, so I'm just going to self-care.
Yeah.
That's not helpful, because
Not
the
helpful.
the two play back and forth.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. Before I can love other people, I have to love myself first.
Or clearly it's caught up together. It's a mixture of both.
It's a mixture of both, yeah.
But, so if we think then to be fair to Google, we're talking about some really complex stuff. And so maybe there's less hits because it's quite complex. And just that phrase, apart from this book by Howell, Biblical Theology of Leadership, they're not, the words aren't usually together in titles and stuff. So maybe somebody out there listening, you'll write something that will connect those titles, and you'll show up on Google, because that would be great, and let us know. Let me take a definition from Howell's book. It's on page 3. He says biblical leadership is taking the initiative to influence people to grow in holiness and to passionately promote the extension of God's kingdom in the world. Now, that's a lot to remember, and most leadership stuff is focused on like short, quippy little sayings that you can remember easily. This is not one of those. Let me read it again, and then Tyler, give a response. Biblical leadership is taking the initiative to influence people to grow in holiness and to passionately promote the extension of God's kingdom in the world. What is this missing? What is it doing well?
I think it does a lot of things well. It focuses on the kind of the role of the leader is to step out. And so that's essential, that there's the initiative piece, not waiting on others to do the work or to get things started. But, okay, if I'm a leader, then I'm going to step out and I'm going to take the initiative and start doing something. But I like the external focus of it's taking the initiative not to, do what I think should be done or to promote my own agenda, but it's to influence people, and it's to influence them to grow in holiness, not necessarily to accomplish specific tasks or to use people as a utilitarian way. So I'm the boss, and so you all are my servants to accomplish what I want to accomplish.
You're Gru and you have minions.
That's right. Yeah. There we go. That's like a caricature of kind of the business world, I suppose. So there's the focus on people, empowering them, influencing them to grow in holiness. So that's actually for their own benefit, and to passionately promote the extension of God's kingdom. And so there is a sense of accomplishment, growth, extension, but it is not expanding my own kingdom, my own influence, but it's for the sake of the kingdom of God and the boundaries of that kingdom growing, which I think is very much in line with how Acts in particular imagines the church operating in the world, that it's kind of extending the boundaries of the kingdom of God from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria to the ends of the earth. So I like it.
It's two things that are drawn to the surface for me, and one is the phrase passionately promote the extension of God's kingdom, and that has the right focus. I'm passionate about what God is doing.
Yeah.
He's using my participation, yes, but it's his kingdom that he is accomplishing, and he's using the means by the Spirit that he chooses. So we're just passionately promoting the extension. We're not doing all of these acts, and then all of a sudden we've ushered in God's kingdom.
Yeah.
Because that's there's some weird political stuff caught up in there, I think. Which we could talk about it's just not.
Yeah. And in Acts, it's about, or even the way that Jesus himself talked about the kingdom of God. He brought the kingdom, but he was also a witness to the kingdom, and he calls us to be witnesses. So promoting means saying, hey, this is what God's doing. Look, notice, look at how the boundaries are extending, and let's follow him into new territory.
And it rounds out that discussion that you're saying there with holiness.
Yeah.
We think holiness, maybe I'll try to prove myself wrong. Usually I think holiness, I think character. So it's more being as opposed to doing, and then the being informs the doing. And really that's probably too neat of too tight philosophical of distinction. It's more interconnected. But nonetheless, what typical leadership stuff misses, I think, is the connection. I mean, there's who is that? Goleman focuses on the social and emotional intelligence. So there's aspects there of I've got to grow before I can do like something with others or for others. But the connection between character and passionately promoting something is not usually as intricate here as it is here. And if we're going to influence people to grow in holiness, we have to have a full picture of holiness, I think. And a full picture of holiness works with the Sabbath. I say works with because it doesn't always have to be on the same day and all this stuff that people like to do this, that, and the other, and square the dot. I just crossed metaphors.
Square the dot.
Whatever. Cross. What am I trying to say?
Cross the I.
Yeah. and make a mark at the T. I can't think of the word anymore.
Cross the T and dot the I.
There you have it. Wow. I just created a tongue twister out of nothing. And so we get that idea. Should we confuse this? Should we try to confuse this, or should we just move forward? That's what I'm wondering. Biblical leadership is taking the initiative to influence people to grow in holiness. And I think we do. I think the way forward into that is Trinitarian theology, which hopefully we'll make practical here towards the end. As if the Trinity's not. We're looking at God. God is 3 in 1. God is unknowable but knowable, and so there are practical elements of truth in Trinitarian theology.
Not reducible only to his practicability, but nevertheless practical.
Yeah. And so Stephen Seaman's Ministry in the Image of God. I'm holding it up here. It's a 100 and some page text. Again from 2010-ish, something like that. Nice green, like olive green cover. And it's literally just subtitled The Trinitarian Shape of Christian Service. And he I think adds to this discussion of what it means to influence people to grow in holiness, passionately promote the extension of God, his kingdom. And he grounds that service in the Trinitarian nature of God. It's in the title. To take a theological idea that he and numerous others discuss, I think may move to serving part of a point here. That idea is perichoresis.
Wait, perico what?
Yeah, exactly. It comes from Greek words, and it's literally like moving around, to move around, like in unison. And it would be, well, we could demonstrate, but it'd be really weird right now with headphones on, and like the cords would get all. But that would prove the point. If the cords got all entangled and stuff.
Oh, there we go.
It's usually called a divine dance. That gets at the idea. I don't think that's useful.
The dance is not useful.
No, I mean, dancing has its place. It's usually for somebody else's place, not my place. But to use the phrase, it kind of glosses over the idea, but never actually thinks or focuses on what it's for. So many take it and say, "Oh yeah, the divine dance. The members of the Trinity are ontologically together."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. interconnected, intermingled.
Mm-hmm. Or mutually interpenetrative, is what a lot of Trinitarian scholars will say. But there's many other scholars, Veli-Matti Karkainen from Northern Europe, and others who say that actually no, God is unity, and we don't have to believe in perichoresis to believe in God. So, because God is one, perichoresis is simply the result. To use Christology for a second, Jesus is divine, Jesus is human. The Spirit is uniting the two. And in that, we have the Spirit with the Son in the world. And obviously the Father's present, but I don't want to complicate it too much further. But we get the idea there of seeing the Trinity in action. And that's that idea of mutual interpenetration or dancing, I suppose. But it's often described as perichoretic union.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea is what we share. We are invited as participants. We are not invited into the Godhead.
Mm-hmm. Very important.
Yes. But we are invited as participants. And so we have a similar perichoretic nature in the fact that Christ dwells in us by the Spirit who dwells in us. Usually we think of the Spirit in that category, but there's numerous texts where Christ is also indwelling.
Yes.
And so if that doesn't fully make sense, I think really that's okay. But Siemens' reference gives an idea of active and passive aspects of perichoresis. So the result of God's unity is reciprocal. It's give and take. It's giving to and receiving from one another, even as all are distinct and yet mingling around each other. So on a different page, Siemens says that perichoresis is, quote, both passive and active, both rest and motion, both indwelling and interpenetration. So the point, if we take the invitation to be an active participant in God's mission because we are indwelt by the Spirit, then how do we develop leadership themes and embody Christian service where we are highly interpersonal with people in a way that models the interpenetrating nature of the Spirit to the Christian? That's a lot to be said.
That's a lot to be said.
Any thoughts? Make it a little bit more practical, perhaps, my question.
Yeah. Well, there's an element of that picture that is like there's a lot of elements that are all connected to one another and important to hold in tension. But if we separate out some of them, it could, at least in my mind, be helpful for identifying what does that mean for leadership. One is recognizing that leadership is never something that's like I do on my own, but I'm influenced by other people and other people are influenced by me. So I have to be aware of that. Another thing is recognizing that I, as a leader, need to give sometimes and I need to receive other times. And so there's the give and take, the reciprocal nature is very important to a leader. The leader's not the one that is only at the top of the food chain and always just giving, which creates burnout and it also creates a lot of other worse things. And yeah, so those are two of the things that come to mind in terms of making it a little bit practical, I suppose.
Proactical?
Proactical. There we go. Praxological. Making it praxological.
Well done. Proactive and practical. I can't even say it again, but that's a nice word.
And also, the other thing was you mentioned both in rest and in motion, that there's an activity that is really important. We shouldn't just be sitting on our butts, but also we do need to rest. And so I think the dance there is a helpful image of like there are times.
How dare you use the dance?
Well, I am not a dancer, but I mean, I admire people who are. But there are dancing is not just constant motion, but it involves a variety of different types of motion, and so that could be helpful as we think about leadership. That it's not just like go, 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 until, and we'll stop when we're dead. But that there is a place for a breath. There's a place for some stability, some regaining your footing before then launching into another, I don't know, move. I don't know what they call those in dancing, but
yeah, and that, I mean, where I'm landing with passive and active elements, I think is really important, because we are. Just my point. How does the Spirit lead Jesus? The answer to that informs how I lead others and how I lead myself, because there are passive and active elements to how the Spirit leads Jesus. If we can say that, at least in the functional nature of how it works out, that's how it goes. And so the passive and active allows for discussion of passive and active leadership. A passive form of leading others is leading myself.
Building your own character.
Because that's the well we draw from.
Yes.
And so adding that aspect, I think, is something that has been missed. Or maybe not missed, but not emphasized enough. Although there's a huge turn towards the ontological within theology in recent times. So maybe it's coming that direction and we're just a product of the times. We'll know in the next 50 years or so, maybe. But this, I think, does also introduce the breakdown for our next several episodes of... Go for it, Tyler.
Yes, so breakdown for the next several episodes, we're going to first focus on leading yourself, then leading others, and then finally, maybe not finally, the next step on the journey, leading teams. And then we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah, we've got some ideas. It's just that's the
roadmap.
We actually
next
have
few steps.
We have more than ideas. We actually have plans on paper and stuff. But anyway, we've got the next several episodes here that are in some sort of little like mini series or something, not necessarily chronological order. But the idea here is to have leadership skills and to lead others well. We must have to reflexively take a look at how we are leading ourselves first.
Yes.
Before going into that, we'll have a little brief pause, and then we'll wrap it up with some practical stuff of leading, how we can lead ourselves and begin that conversation. So, bonus time here.
Bonus time. Ding, ding, ding.
We should call this something like, I don't know, lightning round or something.
Oh, yes.
The question is...
The praxological window.
Yeah, there you go. The praxological window. We need help.
Need help.
Write to us, praxology@formmission.org.uk. I think I said the email correct.
You
this time.
did.
I've got it memorized
only
now.
2 seasons.
Hey, third time's a charm.
Yeah.
That happens. Season 3.
Season 3.
Write to us because we need help on what to call this segment. And bonus points for you because we'll mention your name and you'll forever go down in glory of having created the...
You'll be in the annals.
Better version of the lightning round. Easy question. How was your summer?
Ooh. It was too busy. It was great in that we met a lot of people. We loved a lot of people. We're loved by a lot of people back in the United States, and we also did not rest as deeply as we needed. So looking forward to that in 2 weeks.
Where are you going? Are you going to Croatia?
I'm going to Croatia. We talked about Croatia already. It's still beautiful down there. The weather's turning up here in the north, but it's still sunny down in Croatia.
They do have the weather down there that's nice. That's true.
Indeed.
As for me, my summer was a little crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It was like really good and really not so good because of some personal family things that another individual was causing problems, not in our family, but causing my family problems. And so we really had to learn, I think, that in the next season to thrive and to stay on point with our vision and mission for what we're doing here in the Czech Republic was actually to focus on reconnecting. So we took a good vacation And that piece was just amazing to really like reset some of our family rhythms and create a different family environment. We realized some things. We're like, wow, that's a terrible pattern we've been in. And so we changed them. And over the course of this year, I think I'm excited to see how that turns out.
That's awesome.
If we go into a transition now, leading others by leading yourself, I think that actually a place where Tyler and I and others of our four-mission staff were just at recently plays, I don't know if it plays a strong role in as much as it's a good picture for some of the streams that play into leading yourself. So Tyler, where were we recently?
We traveled to just across the border from the Czech Republic, where we stayed in a beautiful cabin on the Czech side. But then we did a little day trip over into Germany, into the village of Herrnhut, or I don't know what the translation is. Anyway, the location from which missionaries went all over the world. So it was an estate that was owned by a count named, as you put it in your notes, Nick von Zins.
It sounds cooler that way.
Nicholas von Zinzendorf. And he was inspired by pietists to create a community where people could find safe haven from religious persecution and could go deep in their relationship with God. And because of those influences and because of a powerful moving of the Spirit, there was a breaking point in the community where these refugees had come from the Czech lands up there, and then they had this experience that sent them out across the whole world in a time where Protestants were not doing missions. And they really accomplished more in like 30 years than the Protestant church had accomplished in 300. And crazy fruit. So, but you're bringing this up because of this emphasis, his Zinzendorf's background and his heritage was this pietist background, which laid a high emphasis on one's personal responsibility before God for your faith, and essentially, and not just your faith as a ticket to heaven, but for your life, your inner life with God and with others, and taking that really seriously. So going deep in community, deep in the scriptures, and also deep in mission. So
I was just thinking of John Wesley, who's also influenced by pietistic streams.
Yes.
And that was the foundation of him riding on horseback and revivals and missionary movement in the power of the Spirit. So the influence of pietism actually is quite strong, but I think it's because of the focus on personal piety. We shouldn't define a word by using the word, but we could substitute, and I suppose we could say personal holiness.
Yes.
But again, we see how that, there's a reason why they went to Herrnhut for a while. They were trained, they refueled, and then they went out. It wasn't this missionary station that they just sequestered themselves and locked themselves away for good until the end came. There's been movements that did that, but it was really like formation to be sent. And I think in wrapping this portion of discussion up, we are formed to be sent.
Very nice.
Or we are formed in our sending. Because that gets at the Greek nature of the Greek wording of Matthew 28. The Greek
that's true. That's true. As you're going,
or like having been sent, literally is the translation. So it's like you've already gone. Jesus is assuming you've already gone. In which case, who he's talking to, they had already gone. He had sent them out 2 by 2, and they're just continuing that trajectory, that pattern, in a different mode, in a spirit mode, instead of walking with Jesus physically mode. But we at the very least, we are formed in our sending, I think. And piety, focus on holiness. Why do we think sometimes we do that though, don't we? We're like, I can't do that because I got to do this, and this, and then I'm just going to go crash on my couch fall asleep, and I'm going to get up. I'm going to go to my bed. I'm going to fall asleep. I'm going to drink coffee in the morning. Hopefully I remember to eat breakfast. I'm talking to myself now.
That's for you.
I do forget to eat breakfast, but that's most of the time for a different reason related to the health condition that I have. It's weird, but I get focused on other things and forget. So we're formed in our sending. What are some very... Well, let me narrow us down, and I'll say one practical strategy that you think, Tyler, is the most important for leading myself so that I can lead others.
Yeah. I would say gazing on Jesus. Prioritizing your relationship with God, not as a means to an end, but as the destination.
The journey. Something about a journey, or you're focusing on something different?
No, just like that, the enjoying God's presence, not as a way to get refueled so that I can go and get busy for him again, but just because that's what the point is. And I know that I struggle with that. I don't enjoy God as much as I should in terms of just who he is. But that is what transforms us, gazing on him and being transformed from one level of glory to another. So
very Pauline of you.
Well, thank you.
And appropriate metaphor. I think I'll borrow from what some people would say was written by Paul, but I'm just going to say the author of the Hebrews, because I'm being political, and I'm not giving away whether I think Paul wrote it or not, because ultimately I don't think it matters that much to go on record for that book. Anyway, the idea in Hebrews is that of eternal rest in God, and that's my metaphor for the same thing. And sometimes we focus so much on resting or doing things for God, or maybe even with God, that we forget to rest in God. And I think resting in God actually is a good metaphor for both. If I rest in Christ and I'm indwelt by the Spirit who works through me in the same way that did through Jesus, causing growth in wisdom, Luke 2:52, then it's really important for me to bring in that concept of rest. Not because I'm trying to smuggle in an idea that we like to talk about, but if I rest in Christ and the power of the Spirit, by the grace of the Father, then I am able to be freed from certain other things. And sometimes that means I can say no, because it may fall outside of my vision for my ministry, of my calling. There's a lot of stuff that we could unpack there. But I think in big summary, it's focus on resting in God, and maybe a theological key to that could be read through a gospel, one of your favorites, and see where is the Spirit working through Jesus, and how is Jesus trying to rest in the Father. Again, bridging those 3-in-1 Trinitarian themes. I think some really cool stuff is drawn out, if and when people will do that. So focus on leading yourself by reading the Word of God with a specific question in mind, and see if resting in God is a theme that can be used for positive action, because rest isn't just passive. It maybe sometimes is a degree passive, but it's also active, because if I lead myself, then I have more capacity to lead others well. With that, we draw to a close. We thank you for listening. Do write to us, praxology@formmission.org.uk. Give us some ideas. We can change out some of what we're planning to talk about based upon what you would like to hear us say. And so join our conversation. Email us, write to us on the socials, anywhere from where they're sent out, and let us know what you want to hear on leadership, the topic within theology specifically. And also help us with a lightning round theme or name.
And you know what? We don't say this very often, but this could be a key moment in the history of Praxology and in the history of our listeners' lives. what if you shared something you learned from this podcast with someone close to you who needs to hear it, who needs to be encouraged? You don't even have to, you can just steal our ideas and pass them off as your own, and that'll bless them. Or you could say, hey, go listen to the Praxologie podcast.
I think so. Definitely subscribe, have them like and subscribe.
Yes.
But also use it to maybe start a conversation.
Yes.
That's what we're hoping for. And that's what we're praying for. With that, we say, go now in the freedom of the Spirit, who is transforming you into the image of Christ. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.